dude, do you remember like 2 years ago, like just as the pandemic was hitting, we did that thing on the blog where we were like kind of, oh, if anyone needs help setting anything up, get in contact with us. We'll try and help you out. It'd be completely free, pro bono, call it what you will. Do you remember when we did that? And we were like getting people messaging us working from home and trying to sort it out. I'm going to try and keep this story as PG as I can, okay? There was a dude, and hopefully you're watching this, who got in contact and said he had to work from home and he had a NAS, the VPN server set up on it, and he wanted to basically work through there. And at that time, it was backing up his and his family's, and I think it was his wife, and he had at least one daughter. I don't know if it was two daughters. So I sort of patched in remotely using TeamViewer and started sort of setting up, because he was saying that he was trying to use it and the NAS was just conking out. It just was not working for him, and he kept kind of would work and then it would kind of clutter and stop working. I sort of patched in remotely via his PC, and he sat there at his desk sipping his coffee, and I'm like, oh, I can see the problem. Your storage is it's completely chocker. Look, your volume's there, that little circle there is just full, it's completely full there. And he's like, well, that's impossible. I've only had this system like 3 months. How can it possibly be full? Well, look, that's the evidence. There it is. So then he jumps on control, grabs his mouse and his keyboard and starts sort of flitting along, going through the files. And I'm going on TeamViewer, just sitting there watching, wondering what the hell he's doing. Anyway, he starts opening up these files and it is full of filth, like just beyond. It's just there. It's just nothing but adult, basically. And I'm watching on this screen, getting super embarrassed because I'm English and repressed, and I do not like this. And he's sort of going through the files, and he's kind of like, well, what is this? Why is this here? What is this here? And I'm like, oh, who's Sadie? And like the folder, the username was under the name Sadie. So then he goes, I'll be right back. And I can't see anything. All I can see is the screen. But what follows is like 15, maybe 20 minutes of him in another room and a big, massive argument. And I want to desperately disconnect. It's me basically going, hello, can I go now? And I'm saying this into the microphone. Then eventually, he calls me on my phone, and then I've called on the phone. How else would he call me? And then he calls me and says, oh, do you mind if we do this another time? And I'm kind of, yes, please. I could have said that 15 minutes ago, and I sort of hang up. And I've never heard from him again. I have no idea how that story panned out. But what it needs to be is a public service announcement for every techie that people hire. For God's sake, we don't want to know what's inside your files. Please clean the house before you call us, if you know what I mean there. Hello and welcome back, and that is right. Today we're going to talk about the subject of, are Synology safe? I don't know how many of you know, but around about a week or so ago we did a video based on how safe the QNAP platform is after a spate of ransomware attacks, and we think it's only fair that if we're going to talk about one brand, we've kind of got to talk about the others. And if you're going to talk about QNAP, you've got to talk about the big Synology there, because a number of you, in the last few months, maybe in the last year or so, have migrated over to that platform or have been considering it as your first or your next NAS because you've had a kind of the grass is greener feeling about Synology there. You've gone, oh, it must be much more secure. I don't hear anything bad happening over there. And in today's video, we're going to talk a lot about that. We're going to talk about kind of how Synology do things a little differently to QNAP, the good, the bad. We're going to talk about some of the instances where, like anyone else, they are fallible and they have made mistakes. And we're going to talk about how they interact with their customer base. And again, this goes for the good and the bad. It's myself and, of course, Eddie, the web guy, if I'm going to point in the right direction. A big Synology user as well. So we're looking forward to getting some of the intel from Eddie as always. But straight away, Eddie, tell us right now, what is your opinion of Synology and their security on their platform in general?
Yeah, I couldn't be happier with their products actually, because all of this like ransomware going on the QNAPs and Terramasters and also Windows machines. Synology haven't been really affected. At least I haven't been hacked in. Maybe I'm really playing it safe, but I really feel like I'm secure and I'm safe using their products. Really, so I couldn't be happier. Really.
I think they've done a really, that PR of things, the way, again, their reputation online, even when they have been hit by these things, a lot of it does come down to the way that brand interacts with its customers. And it's we've mentioned before, these products are not infallible. They are bulletproof, but at the same time, it's that extra little step. It's the way they've interacted with their user base, new and old, that I think has really stood out for them in the past. I mean, have you ever dealt directly with Synology with anything in the past?
I've been, yeah, trying to resolve a few things, but it's more like user interface issues that things are not happening the way I want it to happen. But it's never been something like security related, never something like that. But
Well, we've
even if I do contact them, it's like it's a very quick response, to be honest. I couldn't complain that I have to wait several weeks, or I would feel like they will try to run away from a problem or hide it. They're trying to help.
and I think a lot of that is one of the, it's one of the big things about what they do differently to a lot of the brands out there. They're a big fan of that Apple kind of rhetoric, that marketing, that design, that position, and I think they've emulated a lot of that, their business model on that, from their live launches to the design, and of course the interaction with their user base, as mentioned. I mean, again, looking at my notes, I think we can't ignore the fact that Synology owners still have to be cautious and to a degree proficient with their hardware systems, but there does feel like there's a lower learning curve required by their end user base to interact with their products. And a lot of that comes down to how structured their systems are and how customizable they aren't compared to some of the other systems out there, which again, if you're not going to use those configuration options, or you could potentially harm yourself, it makes a lot of sense to do it that way. I mean, even looking at my notes about what Synology do differently, one of the earliest things going through both their press releases, and if you go to their security advisory, they're a lot louder about their vulnerabilities. Have you noticed that? Like, when there is a vulnerability, they seem to be a lot louder about it. Do you not think?
Yes, because they also have their own bounty scheme. They are actually asking hackers to come forward and try to hack their system, which is really, really like honorable. It's really good stuff they are doing. So
Mm.
they are asking people to try and find those holes and those issues so they can fix it, because it's going to cost them much cheaper to pay 10,000, 20,000, or even $100,000 or pounds to these white hat hackers who are going to discover all these vulnerabilities than pay, maybe in lawsuits millions, because they were, they didn't care about security at some point, and they lost data for some really important client. So I think they figured out that that's the better route, the better way to go about this.
Well, we've talked about their security advisories in the past and in the previous video. Another thing we didn't really touch on about Synology, and again, I always forget what the initials are, but the PSIRT, the Product Security Incident Response Team, they have an entire area of their business dedicated to this kind of stuff, monitoring and following these up. And that, included with the bounty scheme. And of course, they do run a lot of those third-party things, and a lot of the other NAS brands tend to rely on things like HackerOne, which are more kind of general vulnerability bounty programs, where you can go to this site where they have brands listed and interact with the brand and say, I found a vulnerability, and then it allows a dialogue as a kind of third party. It's nice that Synology have it kind of removed that barrier and just gone, come at us, we can reward you if you find something good. And another part of that, I think we've noticed before, is Synology have betas running for so much longer. I kind of ragged on this with the QNAP video last week, but anything Synology beta related, and I'm talking applications right the way to the likes of SRM and DSM, their betas run for ages. DSM 7 was in beta for what felt like an eternity. Like there was the private beta, the public beta. There's a lot of that rigorous testing there before something arrives. Arguably, a lot of us, myself included, will sit there and go, when is this bloody software going to land? But at the same time, we have to at least acknowledge that that is done for a reason. There is virtue in it for that rigorous test process there, which they are putting. So again, these are all fantastic compliments to put to the brand in the way they've handled these things and with their interaction with the end user base. I mean, you've got quite a lot I would argue you've got more experience with Synology on a day-to-day basis than me. I mean, you use a lot of their remote access stuff, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. I use their Quick Connect almost probably daily, on daily basis, not because of security as much as the way to connect really easily, because then you don't need to do port forwarding or have like DNS or have like a domain name is which is going to check for the IP changes on a daily basis. So I know that the side effect of having a quick connect is their own private virtual private proxy thing server. It might slow things down, so you might not connect as fast as you would wish to. But generally, you don't need speed really for the things you're accessing. If you need to connect and get your documents or something, there's no difference if you're going to download it in 5 seconds or 10 seconds. If you want to upload some sort of video editing work, some photo shoots or photos, then I could understand, because then you might have like 20 or 50 or 100 gigabytes of data to upload, and that could be really annoying. But at the same time, Synology have targeted that issue as well, and they have something called Presto service as well when you create
Protocol server,
a
yeah.
tunnel, so you can have these uploads done much quicker way. But yeah, I do use Quick Connect, because then all you need to do is you type in your NAS name or your Quick Connect ID in all of your apps, including DS video or camera, surveillance cameras, or audio station if you listen to audio, and um, and that's it. That's all you need to do. ID, password, username, and you're connected, and all the traffic is going to go through their proxy server, because in this situation, when you connect this way, Synology server in their premises, in their data center, have allowed only this and only this IP, this computer, to connect and get through your firewalls, through your router in your home, down to your NAS. So you have this private sort of tunnel, this which is the only way you are allowed to connect. So to get through your NAS, you need to authenticate yourself. So it's pretty safe. It's really safe. And as well, if you use HTTPS, which is secured internet way of browsing, so it's all your communication is encrypted. So it's encrypted and then going through the tunnel. So it's extra safe.
But
Um,
with the brand, I guess what I'm asking is that when we did our QNAP video, we talked about how the QNAP has that option to use their my QNAP cloud service, but we were saying how because of recent events, a lot of people have kind of lost a little bit of confidence in those default settings, and they shouldn't really be playing with the port forwarding unless they know what they're doing. Whereas with the Synology platform, you seem to have a little bit more confidence in their Quick Connect system, and I was wondering why is that for you as a heavy user?
Uh, that would be exactly, because you can't connect from anywhere in the world, like from any computer in the world, unless you go through this middle point, this proxy thing. That's what makes it secure. But at the same time, I know that there'll be loads of people complaining about the very same fact, because just because everyone is connecting to the proxy server, they're saying that Synology themselves, if they wanted, they could see the traffic going through. But then at the same time, do you think Synology would try to steal your data? I don't think so.
I
They
think
would
I
jeopardize
mean,
theirs.
again, to go for innocuous, largely encrypted data would be not the best policy, but also I just can't see them doing it, as you say yourself. But no, I mean, going back to the brand a little bit there, and one of the things that makes them stand out from a lot of the other brands, and again, it seems like we're being very, very complimentary. Don't worry, this is going to be balanced very, very shortly. But as a brand, they do seem exceedingly software focused, and I think that same focus is applied to the security, to that means of interaction. When we talk about a lot of default settings, whether you're taking advantage of the Quick Connect or if you're setting up a lot of the settings of the NAS itself, one very big difference I find whenever I'm doing maybe a setup video for Synology or QNAP or TerraMaster or Acer Store or WD or any of the brands, and I'm working on a piece right now down here. I have a true NAS down here that I'm going to be working on very, very soon. But even then, when I've been going through all of these, what I've noticed is the Synology platform not only has a lot more closed controls open to the end user, but many, many, many of the options are unticked or not on by default within the Synology in ways that on other systems they are more freely open off the bat. Those tighter defaults off the early dosing. Now, again, there is an argument that is much, much better to secure position. You've got a potentially uninformed user using a system and knocking open ports and dicking around and basically opening up potential security holes in their storage setup, be it for the case of storage security or stability. But there are going to be users out there that have gone into these systems thinking they can do a certain thing and then just being, why can't it do a thing? Oh, I've got to dig 3 layers deep and turn on the Teams folder within Drive, within the home settings, and lots of things like that, where these feel counterintuitive to a more simplistic, user-friendly ideal, but they are disabled by default for reasons of security. Anyone that's ever tried to enable a lot of the Drive services on Synology will probably be aware, or at least remember, that a lot of those settings by default are disabled. And some of them, when you enable them, you can't help but think under your breath, why would they turn that off? It's bloody obvious you'd turn it on. Of course I want to enable the team folder or whatever. And I think with Synology having that much more closed or rigid policy does counter their benefit hugely in terms of security, because it makes sure that a lot of potential security vulnerabilities never even get close to being open. But again, it's once again that idea that we've discussed in the previous video about having a more customizable, adaptable platform and the inherent risks that we have to accept exist in turn with it. I mean, you're also a user, I recall, that runs, the Synology router setup quite a lot. You're one of the first people I knew that, really invested in the Synology routers very early doors. I think you went straight to the RT and you got an MR as well. What made you go for those?
Yeah, because their software is really good. Because before I used to use Netgear routers because they come with family controls things, so you can see who is connected. You can limit their speeds. You can limit what they can access. You can block certain things out. You can do like schedules, what times you can access at what speeds, and things like that. So. And then Synology came out with their router, their first router, which was I think it was RT 2600. And they actually took one step further, so you could create several, like you could VLAN separate subnets, different speeds for 5 gigabits and stuff like that. So and they actually also have really cool mobile app, so you can actually see who is connected. You can just switch someone's internet off and things like that. It's really good.
Then they added those free VPN clients.
Yeah, also if you're a business user, you can have 2 of their routers, and it's you can create a VPN connection. So one router is going to be in your office, one is going to be at home, and with the free, I think they do 10 or 20 free licenses. When you can establish like connection between your business and your home, there's like a private tunnel, so you don't need to pay extra money for software to do that. And so you can connect to your work, and you feel like you are in their local network, and other way around.
And but this is kind of what I mean about the brand, and that you get a good sense of the priorities they're going for there, and that kind of, it's less about customization. I mean, there is an element of customization about the setup that you can go with, but it's still within quite rigidly held guidelines. But at the same time, you can see that they do prioritize the remote access and the transient properties of data. When we talk about their C2 platform, the priorities towards the cloud, a lot of those innovations they've been doing on that, with some of the stuff they're talking about soon with C2 surveillance and being able to record from a camera to those 2 locations, stuff like that. You can definitely get that feeling that they are doing an enormous focus on access, and you can't have that attitude within the brand to the subject of access without immediately talking about security. So again, kudos to them on that one. And the stuff with the VPN, that was a good both PR win and I would say tactical choice they did there in 2020 there, and that's something they've extended to this day. They've continued that logic. I wish maybe they extended some of that kind of good grace to some of the SMB devices or some of the business-led devices in terms of that VPN plus client there, stuff that you could carry over. But even then, it's still a great little setup. I just wish the Synology platform managed to just a little bit more into customization. Not too much, because then we'd have a whole situation of too many variables, not enough time. But just stuff like you mentioned on the router, when you can create those profiles with batches of devices and internet time and all of these different configurations and choices and options, but at the same time, that level of switch and control and grouping isn't quite as fluid on DSM. But again, I think we've waxed lyrical quite a lot about Synology thus far in terms of stuff they've done right. But again, there have been past incidents whereupon they have dropped the ball in one shape or form, where there have been either ransomware attacks on them. There's been the malware attacks, of course, in the past. And sometimes the problem has been, the Linux that they're running on. Sometimes the problem has been third-party software within the end-user environment. And sometimes, and one incident in 2014 that we'll talk about, was when Synology themselves had the vulnerability within their platform. So, I mean, again, without me going into details immediately, and this is going to be quite telling, hopefully, can you remember many incidents of Synology NAS as a platform suffering attacks?
No, not really. They have quite often, probably they're actually putting on their security advisory list what sort of problems they are, but they are tackling it very quickly. Or no one is actually marketing their mistake or their vulnerabilities as much as QNAP. I think that sometimes it feels like it's a bit unfair that QNAP is getting all that beating, even though other brands are having issues as well, security issues. But I think at the other day I was actually comparing how many security issues there have been within the past year compared QNAP and Synology, and I think QNAP had like 40 or 50 security issues, whereas Synology had like 20, 25, something like that. So you can see a difference, how often actually there is an issue publicized, because so often also you don't get these things public.
Well, you touch on an incredibly important point there about publication and disclosure of a lot of these issues, because sometimes, I mean, we mentioned that bounty earlier on in the video. One of the cool things I'd noticed was that some of them had been raised by end users, and then Synology, as per their T&C on the bounty program, then added that to their vulnerability listing. They didn't have to do that. Someone has volunteered a problem. They could have gone, oh, thanks, here's a check, fix the problem, bash out an update, and never speak of it again. But they didn't do it. They don't do it that way, which again it does fill you with a little bit of confidence. In the past, just looking at my notes here, I've got 4 different incidents that have happened over different yearly periods, and in each one, the key takeaway during it was Synology's reaction, because in 3 out of 4 of these, I can't fault them. Okay, so we've got, for example, past incident, and this was August 2021. There was an OpenSSL vulnerability, and it was taking advantage of a denial of service attack and remote code injection. So in other words, you hammer the system loads and loads and loads until the system is on the floor crying, and then you push malicious code into the system, either for malware or just to get the system to encrypt the contents of the data. Now, these stemmed from an issue with the Linux code. Now, this was highlighted in mid-August, or mid to late August, and was resolved on the Linux side. Now, this on the Synology side was resolved at the end of September. Now, I say resolved, it wasn't fully resolved. And if you do go to the Security Advisory at Synology, you'll see that it's still ongoing. However, if you go into that, you see that DSM and I believe SRM and one of the other platforms they run on within their subsystems of hardware, it had been resolved. It was like, right, we put it in a patch, update the latest patch, you're fine on this. But because some of their incredibly lesser used platforms hadn't updated, they didn't mark it as resolved, which was good because it showed they were still working on it. And I was really impressed with the fact that they could have so easily gone, well, look, DSM sorted, let's go to dinner, and then walk away. They didn't do that. So again, they were one of the first to volunteer it. They were working with a couple of groups where this was being highlighted on, and it got resolved very, very quickly. So again, that's a good idea of the diligence of the company there. And again, I know it seems like I'm blowing smoke, but I think it's important about the reaction of the brands. As long as we all go into this hardware knowing that these things can only be so safe, it comes to a really important factor of how quickly the brands tell their end users and how they tell the end users. So another one with a stealth worker that was working through botnet. So those unaware, botnet is when an infected machine kind of sends out a pulse via the network, via the internet, to basically find other machines. It was one of the ways in which they found out that the QNAP affected models in the last week or so went from in double figures to quadruple figures. So that was in August 2021. And again, Synology were incredibly fast to address this on their news coverage platforms, on their social media platforms, on their security advisory, all of those. And they were incredibly fast about it with the updates. Again, it's that response time. That was the big tell for me. Then, again, July 2019, there was brute force attacks, and they described this as a dictionary attack. So that's when basically password spamming. And a lot of these kind of attacks generally come from online databases that have got user information and passwords that are aggregated over time, which are then, kept or stolen from other websites. And when they find cross references between users online, they then smash the online login credential areas of these NASs. And once again, Synology, within 24 hours, was issuing users to do the usual update your password, stronger stuff, two-step, etc., etc. Yes, it's trite. Yes, it's repetitious, and we've heard it a million times before, but it's that response time again. If you're going to get hit by something like this once, you're going to get hit by it 10 times. I don't really care if it's the same information. I want to know that the brand is acknowledging it very, very quickly. Which again, there were meltdown, Spectre vulnerabilities from third-party software that was communicating with the NAS. Even though that was nothing to do with Synology, it was still alerting users that third-party software on your PC or Mac system could still get into your NAS. Synology didn't have to highlight the word ransomware, malware, or hack with their hardware with this third-party software. They did it because it potentially could lead to users shouting down the line. So again, those are great examples for me of the response time from the brand. But before I get to the last one, can you remember a particular ransom and malware attack that happened to Synology in the last decade?
Yeah, there was this one. How was it called? Help me. You know that, the
I
big
know it.
one.
I'm going to see if you can get it.
Ah,
If this was a game show, there's people at home shouting this at the screen right now. See if you can get it.
Oh no! When you say that, I'll definitely gonna
To
ring
give
a
up,
bell.
it was 2014. It was Synolocker. Now, this was an incident that I think is the one that has set the template for. It was called Synolock or Synolocker in 2014, and I think this was basically, that when you watch sitcoms and there's something on there like X number of days since the last accident, I think this is Synology's version of that, because that was when there was a failing. Their systems did get encrypted. This was a crypto-locked ransomware. They got quite, strongly hit by this very, very quickly. And I think that's the big incident for Synology. And that was 2014. And they learned from that. They learned in terms of public exposure. They learned in terms of the security and the tightness of their platform and the defaults. And they did drop the ball on that incident. They did. There was definitely panic in the air there with regards to end users getting in contact with them. And it wasn't as slick as it was now. But the fact still remains that that incident happened in 2014. It's 2022. And their response time today, as of vulnerabilities right at the end of 2021, or discussions about Chorax and evidence floating around that they are trying to turn their attention back to hitting Synology NASs. Where did I hear about that? I heard about it from Synology's own website and Bleeping Computer. That's where I want to hear about these things. I want to hear it on their own platforms before I get hit. I want to hear it on recognized platforms that are working with Synology and loudly talking about it with Synology, happy to talk about it. And I think going back to the original question for this video about if, are Synology safe? I think the answer is yes, they are safe. They are a closed platform. They are a system that lacks the customization of some of the other platforms out there. There's certainly a brand that costs more than all the other ones out there, with the majority of that budget going on the software, not the hardware. But I can't, at this time, I can't fault their security. I just can't. The way they interact with the customers and the security of the platform. What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. That's very true. They did a very good job with securing their NAS, but you always need to remember that it's not just Synology that could be at fault. It could be the vulnerabilities, could be most likely be yourself, because there are two ways how hackers will try to hack in your system. One is going to be called zero-day attack, which is they are looking for holes in the software, So before the patch is applied, they'll try to attack. So they have this like window of a week, a day, or maybe a month to send and attack all of these computers because they have this hole for a certain time amount. Another thing is human factor. When you are actually downloading unknown attachments and opening some files and installing third party some apps you don't actually trust, or simply you're not even checking is this connection between the website and you or NASA yourself, is it encrypted? So you might be actually typing in passwords and they could be sniffing your network and stealing those passwords, or you might be even visiting similar looking website which looks like a Synology or your bank, and you type in your passwords and then they just steal it from you. So you need to be always very careful. And also when you're opening ports and all these things, is not always that hackers will be targeting NAS directly. First, what they will try to do is get in your home network. So make sure that you have your routers safe. We are actually working now on as well on a tool where people could talk to us and give us IP address, and then we could do a test for them, see if the ports are open. If because I know that not everyone knows how to check these things, but I'll make a video where I teach them how to actually do it themselves. So if they have friends or something, they can do scan of their home network themselves, so they can see if there are any open ports and stuff or any vulnerabilities. So yeah, first thing is to just block those hackers to get into your home network, because once they're in home network, then they can do brute force on your Synology. They can look for any saved passwords or shared folders. What is it, like shared with others in the network? So there's dozens of ways how to get data from your Synology, because it doesn't need to be even encrypted data. They could be sensitive data, what they could take you and ransom, ask for ransom. So otherwise they'll publicize your naughty stuff and things like that. So you need to be careful.
I was going to say, another thing we were talking about following up this video, and let us know in the comments whether you want us to do this, a follow-up to this security series, and we are going to look at obviously the other brands as well. And what we were going to do was set up a Synology and a QNAP NAS with the very latest firmware. We weren't going to do any additional files. We were just going to show the Synology and QNAP platform straight out the box, fresh software, install the latest OS on those, and just to show you what we're talking about when we talk about default settings and options that are available. Because again, it's that idea about a lot of the time with Synology's platform, one of the reasons it's so secure for most users, particularly novice users as well, yes, they have to exercise due diligence, of course, but it's because loads of those options are either absent or you have to really go out of your way to enable them. So again, if you would like to see a video on that about comparing Synology and QNAP's user interface and the default settings for each, then do let us know in the comments and we'll work on that. But it's quite a big video we'd like to work on. But I think apart from that, I think we've addressed everything we can today. Eddie, is there anything you think we've missed?
No, just make sure that this security advisor is always regularly checked on your Synology, because they will be going through all of these ports. They will be checking internal ports on the Synology itself. They're not going to do your router, but they'll do the internal ports. They'll check is there any malware. They're going to check is their usernames enabled, admin accounts enabled, the passwords are too easy. So these very simple things that you should be aware of, and make sure you do two-step authentication, and you also do brute force protection. So if someone is trying to guess a password 2 or 3 times, then this IP is just straight away blocked for a day or for a month. So in that case, if the hacker gets in your home network, at least they will not get in your NAS. So
but I think that's it. And again, do stay tuned for Eddie's video on setting up your router right for the first time. And we're also going to be doing a kind of combo video showing you how to basically close every door, shut every window, lock every bolt in your NAS and home network together very, very soon. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, chuck us a like. It genuinely helps us understand what we're doing right and wrong. Click subscribe if you want to learn more. And again, if you do need help with your setup, there are links in the description to the free advice section over on NAS Compares. Just ask us a question, tell us your setup, chuck your email address in there so we can contact you. We don't care. We're not going to do anything with it. We just want to respond. On top of that, there are links there to a few setup guides for your network and security for your Synology platform and others. And other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. See you later, Eddie. Cheerio, mate.
See you later.
Goodbye, everyone.